Okay, put on your thinking caps. We're going to talk about creation. In the first part here, we're going to talk about Christianity and science. The authors write, first, there is no conflict between Christianity and science itself. This is because the Christian worldview, which believes that God created the world with natural laws and orderliness, is what undergirds the entire scientific enterprise. They make a second introductory point. There is total conflict between Christianity and scientific naturalism. Naturalism is the belief that all phenomena can be explained in terms of presently operating natural causes and laws. In other words, that God is omitted altogether from the equation. This all just happened. Third thing to understand as we're getting into this chapter is that the Bible in general, and the book of Genesis in particular, was not written with the intention of being a scientific textbook, but rather it is a theological narrative written to reveal the God of creation, which means its emphasis is on God and his relationship with humanity, and not on creation. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a doctrine of creation. We're going to get into that in the videos ahead, but they're just setting up that it's important to understand that the Bible in general was written as a revelation from God to reveal who God is, not as a textbook about creation or about science. And the fourth thing to understand is that one's view of the date of creation should not be the litmus test for Christian faithfulness. In other words, this really isn't something worth really fighting over. And again, we're going to see that as they explain in the rest of this chapter. So let's get warmed up for that. The first book of the Bible, Genesis, takes its name from its first words, in the beginning, as Genesis means beginning. And if you haven't done so, you should probably read Genesis chapter 1, especially, and chapter 2, so you can see the biblical account of creation. Now, it's only in the last few decades that has undeniable evidence forced the natural sciences reluctantly to agree with what Scripture has taught, that the universe had a beginning. It's an amazing testimony to the truth of Scripture. Again, they're going to cover that again toward the end of the chapter. The opening phrase, in the beginning, speaks of an inauguration of a history, a space and a time when the Lord worked. Implicitly, it anticipates an end, a time when he will bring history to an end and create a new heavens and a new earth. Now in Genesis 1:1, the word used for created is the Hebrew word bara, which means creation from nothing. So in the creation account, we see that God created the heavens and the earth, and this phrase could more literally be translated skies and land. Now in other places in Scripture, the phrase includes the sun and moon, which could in turn mean that the sun and moon were created as part of this first creation. The skies and the land are without form and void before God prepared them for humans. Now the authors are coming to a point here, and here it is. The best understanding of the creation account, according to these authors, is not that God created primordial chaos and formed earth out of it, but that God created everything out of nothing, and that the land existed for some unstated period of time in a desert-like empty state. Now, if that's a little confusing to you, just hold on, because we'll get to this a little bit more as the authors develop this more toward the end of the chapter. But here's what the authors say. The creation of heavens and earth in the first verse is a concrete, historical, scientific fact. But the text simply does not tell us when it happened, only that it was sometime before the preparation of the land for humans to dwell with God. In the beginning means that there was an inauguration, but not when that moment was. Therefore, Genesis 1:1 leaves open both the possibilities of a young and an old earth. And again, later we're going to look at the different theories on young and old earth and the different views on creation. But for now, before we get to that, why don't you just hit pause and answer some of these questions before we move on to the next video.